The Elbaph arc has kicked in full swing as we are introduced to the Island of Giants and its dangerous prince Loki, but with it come a multitude of references to Norse mythology, including how Loki's mythology foreshadows the destruction of the One Piece world in the Ragnarok, and how the island of Elbaph is inspired by the 9 realms of the Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, so let's break down all of this culture and myth together. On the cover, Yamato visits Amigasa village, which has seemingly been rebuilt. Yamato is chilling on top of Komachiyo while watching Tama train under Shinobu's apprenticeship to become a good kunoichi so that she can join the Straw Hat Pirates at some point in the future, something that is clearly evident that she's working hard by the several bandages on her body. Oddly enough though, Shinobu has already reverted back to her older, wider self despite Ryokugyu helping her slim down. On the next cover instead, as Yamato and Tama are sleeping, we see someone stealing a katana. If we just backtrack our steps through Wano, the obvious answer would be that this is Kyukimaru, the fox Onimaru that transformed into a humanoid through the Hitohitonomi model Onyudo, since it was his whole character to be taking the swords of others. Though it brings into question why he'd steal from Yamato, and if this is a red herring by Oda to trick us with this being someone else. Back to our block country, the Lord Sungod grows furious over the destruction of his shrine, which he accidentally calls his room. Similarly, he almost says his pets and corrects himself to say his servants. More interestingly though, he refers to inhabitants of his kingdom as live dolls, which is the name of the chapter, with the kanji reading as living dolls, treating his inhabitants as if they were just toys. The kanji reading refers to a specific type of dolls from Japanese Edo period that were made to look like hyper-realistic humans. Thanks to Nami, we get a good visual of the country, where we see a bottom third of the room is devoted to his studio, the so-called shrine, where you can spot a similar skull on top of the shelf, while 2/3 are the country with the mirrors built in them. The giant Yggdrasil tree is stuck to the wall, so it might be fake too, just like the clouds that are just hanging cotton. Next to the X where the Straw Hats are, you can spot Big Stein Castle, which appears to be the only large castle in the area. The sun god hopes that the Mimigami, or ear god, can stop them, but as we see, he's already being roasted and eaten whole by Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. In this case, we get its actual name, which is the Glattobani, which could be a pun on gluttony. There is also a Norse figure called Glut, but the connection could be looser here. The sun god makes a grand speech about narratives and how the Straw Hats are crafting a narrative in his own world. This is, as we explained last time, the nature of a tabletop RPG, where the Grand Master controls some aspects, while the players craft their own stories through their own choices, showing this sun god enjoys playing as a god in this grand RPG he's built. However, he lets go a certain detail which confirms to us his identity, even before it is plainly stated later in the chapter. He says that Hajrudin acknowledged the Straw Hats, but he doesn't, revealing his identity to likely be one of the giant warrior pirates, and as we mentioned last week, he appears to be wearing the same high-heeled shoes that Road and Gerd wear, but given the masculine speech pattern he has, different from Gers we've heard before, this has to be Road, which indeed turns out to be the case. As a bit of a background, Road is one of the new giant warrior pirates, the new crew that Hajrudin formed in the present after the inactivity caused by Dorian Broggy disbanding a century ago. However, the new giant warrior pirates originally worked for Buggy's delivery during the timeskip as some of his best men, but after the Dressrosa incident, Hajrudin defected to join the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. As we saw in a cover story, Road is the navigator of the crew, alongside the other members, which include Hajrudin the captain, Stansen the shipwright, Goldberg the cook, and Gert the doctor. Thing is though, we actually know all of these characters from even prior to the story. Now, Hajrudin obviously appeared in Dressrosa, but you may not remember that Stansen is the same giant that was captured during Sabaody and freed by Rayleigh in the human auction house, after which he returned to Elbaph and joined Hajrudin's crew, also growing a sick beard. Girth is the childhood friend of Big Mom that was hanging out with her during her flashback, and Road and Goldberg were mentioned to have been born during the middle of Big Mom's flashback, so in December of 63 years ago, shortly after Prince Loki himself actually was born as well. Keep in mind that in giant years, that's still fairly young. During this flashback, you can also spot Hajrudin training and a young Stansen watching behind him, accounting for everyone. We did see them more later on, however, as after the incident of Ohara, Ohara, as seen in Vegapunk's flashback, we saw some giants rescuing the books of Ohara, seemingly under Soul's orders. However, if you look closely, these are actually Hajrudin, Girth, and Goldberg. Stanson not being there makes sense, as he might have already been somewhere sailing overseas, but Road not being there could have been a hint to his more dismissive, selfish attitude and deeming the rescue of books as a trifle matter. To elaborate further on his speech pattern though, Road speaks in a very haughty and mighty attitude. He also has an iconic laugh, which is de-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo, which sounds more like de-he-he-he in English. As we mentioned last time, Road uses the first person pronoun seisha and words like gozaru, which are all archaic samurai terms. But the best way we can put this into words is that he's essentially speaking like a weeb. The use of these words in modern day is seen as a being try-hard and trying to sound edgy and cool, as is apparent from his god complex. He even calls the Straw Hats by the nicknames of Luffy-tasso, Zoro-tasso, Nami-tasso, Usopp-tasso, San-tasso, and Cho-tasso. The honorific tasso is a variation of tan, which you might be aware is a suffix used for anime characters, particularly seen as a cringy suffix used by weebs to refer to their best girls or even idols. Road even later refers to Nami as his oshi, which is a Japanese idol term for one's favorite, their best girl that they root for. We later find out how Road was able to get the Sunny, which was quickly abducted by Mugen through the air, who is colossal even compared to the 56-meter ship. And the reason that he was able to snatch it without them noticing is because they passed through an area called the Sleep Fog Sea, a stretch of sea between Egghead and Worland that seemingly has fog that puts people to sleep, hence their drowsiness. Though he kept them sleeping further with sleeping gas, perhaps even attained from that same area. As sleeping gas is a real thing, it makes sense that there is a sea area in the One Piece world where this gas forms naturally. Amidst his speech, Usopp tries to break through the wall with a Hissatsu Midoriboshi Dokuro Bakuhatsugusa, or secret technique Green Star Exploding Skull Grass, which is an attack he first used during Fishman Island. The reading of one of the kanji at the end here is different, but it could be an editorial mistake. Speaking of mistakes, Luffy here uses Gear 4th, but only on one of his arms, similar to Gear 3rd. This might be why he called Gear 4th a couple chapters ago, showing that Luffy has grown in strength. His fist stretches far so back that it bypasses Road and goes all the way back inside of the shrine studio. Luffy then shatters the wall and the Straw Hats break free. Luffy appears excited, but we don't get to find out what lies there quite yet. Still, there is a comment from Road that is kinda suspicious. He mentioned that his location used to be a giant detention center in the past, so a sort of jail, meaning its walls were made strong enough to not let giants simply break away from it. We get to see right away where we are, and it is indeed at the shores of Elbaph, as indicated by the large tree in the background. The castle they were in, or detention center as Road defined it, is a prison built atop a hill with a large bridge connecting towards the leaves of the tree. However, we'll break down the geography of Elbaph later in just a moment. Approaching from the bridge are Girth and Goldberg, the other two members of Hajrudin's crew aside from Stanson, as well as her owl, Piper. They drop several relevant names, such as that of Elbaph's shame, Loki, who we'll get to later, but also that of Yarul. If you recall, Yarul was one of the two giants seen in Big Mom's flashback, who both serve as the previous captains of the giant warrior pirates. Waterfall Beard Yarul was killed by a kid Big Mom, which caused much of the tension between her crew and the giants of Elbaph, while Yarul still lived. We thought that he might have died of old age, but surprisingly he is still kicking around. Giant lifespans are no joke, because considering how he was 345 years old as of Big Mom's flashback 63 years ago, it means that now he must be 408 years old. Let me put it into perspective. When Yarl was born, Mont Blanc Noland hadn't reached Jaya yet. In fact, he hadn't even left his home country yet. That's how old we are speaking, 4 centuries ago, halfway to the Void Century. It was mentioned that giants usually live over 3 times the lifespan of humans, but evidently this over is certainly going generous. As the Straw Hats cross the bridge, Luffy claims to feel a powerful presence. He says that it comes from the same place where there was the Country of Blocks, claiming that it must have been the source of the large roar. This is referring to the massive roar that was heard a couple chapters ago at the end of said chapter. Some mistook this to be the sound of some other creature in the Block Country, but the way it sounded in Japanese certainly came off as way more aggressive, indicating some larger creature causing this, evidently the source of power Luffy heard. Back on the Great Eric, we see that Dory and Broggy have gotten new bounties. Fittingly, these are 1.8 billion each, which is a far higher number than their previous 100 million bounties from a century ago. Robin explains that bounty prices are different than they were a century ago, likely as a result of inflation or increase of wealth. I suppose inflation hits all economies one way or another. Their bounties going up makes one wonder if the Straw Hats have gotten new bounties as well, especially as you'd imagine the Gorosei would consider Luffy and his crewmates important targets. However, in his Gear 5 photo in the newspaper, Luffy bears the mark of friendship on his arm. The weird thing is that he clearly didn't have this mark on his arm during Egghead, which the Straw Hats also find weird, meaning that if this mark is here, then the picture must have somehow been altered by someone on the newspaper side. And when you think about it, it makes sense, as it was likely Vivi who snuck in this edit to the picture, likely through some excuse. That way she could send a message that only the Straw Hats would understand to let them know that she is safe and with the World Economic newspaper. This even parallels when Vivi saw the message of 3D2Y and knew it meant something but struggled to understand what. The issue, however, is that the only Straw Hats here are Robin through Jinbei, who are not present there for the farewell, which explains why the first 6 Straw Hats were chosen. Robin swears she has seen the mark somewhere before, so while she may not know the significance of it, she might have perhaps still seen it on their arms after leaving Alabasta. Interestingly, Brook mumbles to himself. The Giants explain that Hajrudin actually happens to be the prince of Elbaph. However, there is yet another prince, and that is Loki. For some background, we already know of Loki from quite a while ago, as he was originally introduced in early 2017, over 7 years ago. Loki was stated to be the prince of Elbaph and having fallen in love with Charlotte Lola, one of Big Mom's daughters. This brought Big Mom great joy, as it meant she could repair her relationship with the Giants through their wedding, and add Loki's power and Elbaph's army as her allies. However, everything came crashing down as Lola decided to run away to pursue her own love, which led her to form the Lolling Pirates and end up eventually in Thriller Bark, still asking for people to marry, until she obviously eventually met Gotti during the Dressrosa cover story. Big Mom tried to desperately fix things by using her identical twin Chiffon as a stand-in, but the Giants noticed and relationships worsened even further. Big Mom claimed that if the marriage had gone through, then she might have had enough military strength to have become Pirate King. And maybe that might not be that much of an exaggeration, as Loki said to be so powerful that it took the combined strength of Elbaph's giants to lock him up. He's stated to not be right in the head, as he murdered his father, the King Harald, in order to obtain his so-called legendary devil fruit. King Harald is likely named after Harald the Fair-Haired, the first king of Norway, who also saw the 2 princes. In this case, it seems that Harald had eaten the fruit, so Loki had to kill him in order to eat it, as the fruit is reincarnated after death. We had a similar case with Teach and Thatch, as the Ace novel implied Thatch had eaten the fruit, which is why Teach had to kill him, and later eventually killed Whitebeard as well. The interesting thing is that this fruit was seemingly a legendary fruit. Keep in mind, legendary, not mythical, meaning it has historical importance rather than strictly being a mythical zoan, even if it could still be. This is actually something that was set up as early as Hajrudin's first introduction. When he first appeared, Hajrudin stated that by eating the Mera Mera no Mi, he would become powerful enough to be king of the Giants. This actually was setting up this very specific conflict, as it would make sense that since Loki ate an incredibly powerful Dal fruit, that Hajrudin wanted to match it by eating an also quite powerful fruit. And him claiming that he wanted to become king of the Giants was a clear allusion to the fact that he wanted to be the next king in the succession of Warland.
俺は世界を終わらせる太陽の神ローキ。
And we do in fact see Loki, who turns out to have been chained up in what seems to be the bottom of the detainment center. Finally, yet another one of the final face reveals before the end of the series, with a few major ones being of course Joy Boy and Emo left. He sports tattoos on his arms, long hair, a beard, and a large horn helmet. Yet most interesting is how he is blinded, particularly as his his eyes shine in the last panel under the bandages. This makes me thus wonder if the eyes are connected to his legendary devil fruit that he has stolen, and thus his eyes need to be blocked for him not to use his fruit. The obvious connection with eyes to Norse mythology is Odin, who sacrificed an eye in order to attain greater wisdom, but it's hard to say for sure. Also, if you look at his belt, you can spot a skull with a crown on it. The crown is actually very similar to the one that Loki wore during his first time we saw his silhouette, which, despite being nothing like he looks in the end, still bears this crown motif seen on his belt. The way he speaks in general is incredibly rude and insolent, owing to his crazy disposition. The design is actually somewhat reminiscent of historical drawings of Loki, who depicted him with a similar beard. Of course, he is named after the famous figure of Loki, the god from Norse culture. Loki is a trickster who is known for shape-shifting and taking different forms. He is famously known to have caused the death of the god Balder, whose name is similar to Harald's in Japanese, and was chained up as a result, just like Loki here. He does, however, eventually break free from his chains and plays a major role in the grand cataclysm of Ragnarok, which was literally the end of the world. This is once again indicated here in the story, as they claim that if Loki is freed, he could easily destroy the world. This is no light statement, as this statement has only been used to describe the ancient weapons, with the only exception being Whitebeard's devil fruit. Loki even claims that he is the man who will end the world, referring to himself as the Sun God. In this case, unlike the Lord Sun God that Rode was playing at imitating, the term here is Taiyo no Kami, or Sun God, identical to the definition of the Sun God Nika, Taiyo no Kami Nika. But I wonder if Loki claiming to be the sun god could perhaps tie with the devil fruit that he may have eaten. Could there perhaps be like a second incarnation of the Nika fruit, perhaps from a slightly different myth of Nika that differed a bit from the story that led to the formation of Luffy's fruit? After all, the giants have been religiously defending this fruit for potentially centuries. Or perhaps it could be another type of sun god that differs from that of Nika but that still fits the definition. Either way, I feel that Loki calling himself the Sun God is a very big hint here. After all, in Norse mythology, Loki is known to be a shape-shifter, someone who can assume many forms, so perhaps his fruit allows him to transform into many different things, including animals, creatures, and even inanimate objects, making it a truly busted devil fruit. Loki explains that we are on Elbaph, in the Kingdom of Warriors, Warland. We originally thought that Elbaph might have been the name of the country and Warland that of the island, but instead it's the opposite. It's Elbaph Island and the Warland Kingdom. That said, we get a romanization for the name, showing that it is indeed Elbaph with a PH rather than Elbaph, like the official translation had been using, and like the term that the fans prefer to use for all these years. However, we get to see the island in full as the camera pans out, and we get to witness Elbaph in all its glory. Indeed, the island is built on a rock with many jagged mountains, at the center of which is a massive tree that stretches into the sky. The tree has a second tree atop it, creating two layers of tree. From this tree are flowing several rivers that then drop into the sea. These are the mysterious vertical shapes that we saw falling off of Elbaph in previous times we've seen the island, and just as we had correctly guessed, these are in fact waterfalls falling off of the top of the tree. This tree is almost certainly inspired by the Yggdrasil, the world tree of Norse culture upon which the 9 realms exist. In many depictions of the Yggdrasil, it is represented as a double-layered tree, which explains the 2 trees in this case. It makes sense that with Elbaph essentially being the whole world for the giants, it would be inspired by the idea of the world in Norse mythology. And true enough, it looks like different regions of Elbaph might have different weather and different characteristics, so it's possible that across the entire island there are 9 different regions, each inspired by the 9 realms of Norse mythology, which include Asgardr, the realm of gods, Vanaheimr, another settlement of gods, Alheimr, the realm of elves, Midgardr, or Middle Earth, where humans live, Jotunheimr, a realm of the gigantic Jotnar, Muspelheim, the realm of fire, Svartalfheim, realm of dark elves, Niflheim, the frozen hell, and Nidavellir, realm of dwarves. In this case, I think it's safe to say that the realm we are currently find ourselves in is inspired by Niflheim, the frozen hell, as not only is it completely frozen over with harsh winters, but it is also where prisoners are banished, essentially sent to hell, as Loki is imprisoned and sealed there. On the opposite side, on ground level, we can see something in the shape of a pipe jutting out of the tree, but it's too hard to make out and seems too curved and high to just be a root. We also know that the village of Elbaph is located on ground level, the one we saw in Big Mom's flashback, as it was built on solid land with the tree as a backdrop. We also saw some settlements by the coast when Shanks departed to fight the Kid Pirates. Given how this is the most normal realm, this could perhaps be Midgardr. Midgardr was said to be surrounded by the Jormungandr snake, which we now know the giants of Elbaph likened the red line to, referring to it as a blood-stained snake. Going higher onto the second level, we see a location with a massive sword jutted into it, one that must truly be of colossal size given the size of the island, especially when you compare it to the giant-sized bridge we see below. Adjacent to it are massive cannons, so big they're even bigger than the castle in the entertainment center, seemingly being used as a defense by the people of Elbaph as they are pointed towards the sea. An identical pair can be seen on the opposite side of the tree. Behind the sword is another area that appears to have a large lake, with a rainbow behind it. Some structure is covered by the clouds as well. Opposite to it is a large castle, far bigger than the entertainment center, with more cannons and a large gate. This could be the royal palace that was mentioned in Big Mom's flashback, but it's also possible the palace could be elsewhere. After all, we don't see the very top of the tree, so what if there is yet another realm atop it? Perhaps this could be Asgardr, the realm of the gods. Still, I'd like to take a step back and put it all into perspective. Elbaph was first mentioned in December of 1999, a quarter of a century ago, in a time that was still the previous century. We have waited 25 years to see Elbaph Island with our own eyes, and finally, it's here. It's real in all its beauty and glory. As one of our final arcs before the end, we are ready to dive into the wondrous land of giants and Norse mythology, the Elbaph arc.